Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Water Cooler. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X, and check out our latest new content that we post. Now, tomorrow night is going to be one for the books. The circus is coming into town because Mike Tyson is fighting Jake Paul on Netflix. The main fight card starts at 8 o'clock. So be sure to check it out because I'm sure it will be a ton of fun, and that's what I'm here to do tonight is to break down what's happening with this fight. So there are, as far as I can tell, 6 or 7 fights on the main card. 3 of them are championship matches, but to be quite frank, it's nobody that you and I have ever heard of. So in this breakdown, I'm just going to focus on the main event. I don't mean that as disrespect to those fighters. I'm sure they're great. Could probably beat up me with both hands tied behind their backs. But I know what people want to hear about, and that is Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. So let's start with the tail of the tape. Mike Tyson is 58 and Jake Paul is 27. So that's a 31-year age gap for those keeping count. So I don't know if there's ever been a professionally sanctioned fight in boxing with the age gap that wide. I'm guessing not. So that's one for the history books in and of itself. Mike Tyson is 5'10", and Jake Paul is 6'1". The fact that me and Mike Tyson are the same height really puts into perspective that, height's not everything. His 5'10" is not like my 5'10", and it really makes you wonder, if I worked that hard, could I look like Mike Tyson athletically? Could I be like Mike Tyson at the height of 5'10"? So really, for all the short kings out there, if 5'10" is enough to be considered a short king, there's still hope for us yet. Somewhere deep down, you can channel your Mike Tyson and get into shape like that. Uh, Jake Paul has the reach advantage with a reach of 76 inches to Mike Tyson's 71 inches. And this will be Mike Tyson's first sanctioned fight since 2005. He's got a record of 50 wins, 6 losses, and 2 no contests, one of which was the famous Evander Holyfield. Well, no, I guess that was a loss because I'm pretty sure he got disqualified when he bit Holyfield's ear off, so scratch that. And Jake Paul is 10-1, with his one loss coming to Tyson Fury's little brother Tommy, who is 10-0 as a fighter. A lot of people give Jake Paul flack for the fact that he never fights professional boxers in their prime or even just like young professional boxers. The one time he did, he lost. So, I mean, that tells you just about everything you need to know about Jake Paul's fighting ability. I think Jake Paul is an above average fighter for the general population and a below average boxer as far as professional boxers go. Honestly, after this fight, just because I'm so sick and tired of people flaming on Jake Paul's celebrity sideshow fights and saying that, they're a joke and this and that, I want to see him fight some actual, not contenders because he's not good enough to fight a contender, but some actual professional boxers in their 20s on the come up. It would be good for him to get him in there and have some real fight experience, and it'll be good for them because it'll help them make a name for themselves. But we're going to get to the draw factor here in a little bit, but I just wanted to address at some point in this breakdown the critique of Jake Paul that he doesn't fight real fighters. That's true. The only time he has fought an actual boxer in his prime, he lost. Doesn't bode well. He needs to have some fights against actual 20-year-old boxers in order just because if he's going to keep doing the celebrity boxing thing, he's going to have to keep hearing this criticism levied at him. So why not just do it for a year or two and shut people up? I'm tired of hearing about it every time I want to enjoy a Jake Paul fight and I have to hear about how he's not a real boxer. He can't hold his own. He's just a joke. And yeah, obviously he's not a real boxer, but I am curious to know how he would stack up against a middle of the road actual fighter. And it would be just a cool thing. And a lot of people say the reason he doesn't do it is because he did lose to Tommy Fury and he doesn't want people actually to know how bad of a boxer he is. But it would probably behoove him to work on his actual boxing skills and get better as a fighter. So I don't know. I think he should look into it. But this fight was supposed to happen earlier this year in the summer, but an injury to Mike Tyson in training camp ended up getting it postponed. So now we get it tomorrow. The fight will go 8 rounds, and each round will be 2 minutes long. Usually, boxing rounds are 3 minutes, so this is kind of a concession, I guess you could say, a way to make it not quite as difficult as a professional fight, even though this is a professional fight. Like, the boxing commission has sanctioned this. This isn't like when Mike Tyson fought Roy Jones Jr. in 2020 or some of Jake Paul's earlier fights that weren't sanctioned. This is an official fight. It will count on their records, even though it's not the usual 3 minutes. So now that all the numbers are out of the way, let's get to the meat of this. As far as I've seen, these are the main talking points going into this fight. It is who's going to win? Is it appropriate for a 58-year-old to fight a 27-year-old? Is Mike Tyson ruining his legacy by doing this fight? And is this fight a disgrace to the sport of boxing? The first one, I think, is the easiest to answer. Mike Tyson is going to win. I don't care how old he is. I don't care that Jake Paul has the height and the reach advantage. I'll believe that Jake Paul can beat Mike Tyson when I see it with my own two eyes. Now, Jake Paul is not a natural heavyweight, and he's fighting heavyweight in this fight. I saw the pictures of him at the weigh-in, and he looks big. I mean, he's got muscle. It's not like he's gotten chunky or anything, but I've never seen him look this heavy in his life. And I don't think it's going to be a good fit for him boxing with all that extra weight on. He's never been fast, period, in boxing terms. That's something that the Tommy Fury fight put on full display. And now he's going to be even slower. And I think Mike Tyson will capitalize on it. I expect Jake Paul to get tired fairly early on into the fight. And when you're going up against somebody who has punching power like Mike Tyson, I don't think that's a good combo. Now, you can rebut that all you want to and say that Mike Tyson is a 50-year-old man. He'll be slower than he was in his prime, obviously. He'll be maybe as slow as Jake Paul. He can't take a punch. His punch won't be as strong as it used to be. It's dangerous for him to even get in the ring with Jake Paul, etc. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of talking points around this fight that essentially boil down to, but Mike Tyson's 58 years old. We don't know what he's going to look like. A lot of people have been talking like that. Dana White's talked like that. Oscar De La Hoya. Rob Parker said on Fox Sports Radio today that boxing should be ashamed of itself for sanctioning this fight, and he hopes Mike Tyson gets knocked out. And all this commotion that's being had with all the sports talking heads about this age difference is misplaced, in my opinion. If it were almost any other 58-year-old man, I might agree. But this is Mike freaking Tyson we're talking about, the baddest man on the planet. Now, follow me here because I'm going to make an analogy that makes sense to me. Hopefully, I explain it well enough for the viewers to understand it. But all this talk about Mike Tyson's age reminds me of a quote from a show I watched as a kid called The Legend of Korra. Now, context for this quote isn't too important, but essentially in the show, people can control the elements, air, water, earth, and fire, and use it to fight. And this guy's on trial for bloodbending, and so, yeah, there's the context. So in the show, a character named Sokka says this, and I think it perfectly sums up Mike Tyson. In my years, I've encountered people with rare and unique bending abilities. I once bested a man with my trusty boomerang who was able to firebend with his mind. While even metal bending was considered impossible for all of history, the overwhelming amount of evidence has convinced this council that Yacone, who was the guy on trial, is one of these unique benders. Well, in our world, in the real world, there are human beings with rare and unique athletic abilities that tap into parts of human potential that most people would not be able to fathom. And Mike Tyson is one of those people. He is not like other 58-year-olds. He's one of the most gifted athletes of the last 100 years. And I would go back farther, but we don't have good photography and video evidence of people from over 100 years ago, so can't say that for sure. But I can say this. He doesn't operate under the same rules as other 58-year-olds. There will be a point, I'm sure, in his life where it does become dangerous for him to get in the ring with 20-year-olds. But I don't think he's hit that point yet. I saw the fight 4 years ago against Roy Jones Jr. He looked quick. He looked like his punches still hurt. Roy Jones looked like Tyson's punches still hurt at the end of the fight. Now, granted, that was 4 years ago, and I'm not over 50, but I'm sure, once you get up to that age, the years make a lot bigger of a difference than they used to. So the gap between a 54-year-old and a 58-year-old might be a lot bigger than the gap between a 24 and a 28-year-old. So I'll grant you that. But I think that Mike Tyson is a freak athlete who, even if he's not as strong and as fast as he used to be, is still plenty strong and fast enough to handle Jake Paul. And at the end of the day, Mike Tyson's a 58-year-old man. I trust that Mike Tyson knows what he can and can't handle at this age. And if he thinks he can go, and he definitely looks like he can go, I'll defer to his judgment. I've seen his training camp videos. The level of speed he's got is just unfathomable to me as a 23-year-old. If I can move 25% of that fast when I'm 58, I will count that as a win. So I expect him to win tomorrow night and confirm me in my prediction and all of this great praise that I've heaped onto him. Now, maybe he comes out tomorrow and he looks like he's 68 and he's slow and he gets knocked out by Jake Paul, and I'll have to eat a bunch of crow the next time I'll jump on this podcast. But I don't see it. And honestly, if this fight goes the distance, I'll take that as proof that it's rigged. In Mike Tyson's last fight, there was clearly an agreement with Roy Jones that the fight was going to be called a draw no matter what happened, because Mike Tyson obviously won that fight. When Logan Paul fought Floyd Mayweather, it was clear that they were doing it for entertainment purposes and weren't actually trying to have a physical athletic boxing match, because at one part in the fight, Floyd accidentally rung Logan Paul's bell and helped him up and kind of held him in a clutch so he wouldn't get knocked down and the fight would have to get ended. So clearly this fight is first and foremost an entertainment spectacle. It's more WWE than it is real boxing. And neither Mike Tyson or Jake Paul want this to end in the first round. Even though Mike Tyson's been going around saying that he wants to hurt Jake Paul, he feels like a killer. He feels like he's Iron Mike again. So all that talk, it's just promotional. They're trying to sell a fight. They're in it as businessmen. And I do think that there really is some ego and some competitiveness on the line. I think that Mike Tyson doesn't want to get embarrassed by Jake Paul. And I think that Jake Paul would love to be able to knock out Mike Tyson. But ultimately, I think that they're both putting the money first, which leads us pretty well into the next talking point. That is whether or not this fight ruins Mike Tyson's legacy. For the pundits, a former world champion getting in the ring with a YouTuber like Jake Paul is an insult to the legacy of that title that was held by Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis and Rocky Marciano and all those great fighters of the past. And by participating in this farce, Mike Tyson diminishes himself and that world title's legacy. Anybody that's talking like that is pure and simple a mark. At the end of the day, the fight game is about entertainment and money, not titles. And that's nothing new to boxing. Rocky Marciano fought an over-the-hill Joe Louis. Muhammad Ali put on a show with the past his prime Floyd Patterson. Larry Holmes fought a way past his prime Muhammad Ali. Anybody who's talking about how this Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight shouldn't be sanctioned because it's a health hazard to Mike Tyson, if boxing will sanction that Muhammad Ali-Larry Holmes fight, this fight doesn't even compare to that. Muhammad Ali, legend has it in that physical that he couldn't even do the touch your nose test properly. So the fact that that fight got sanctioned is the real disgrace to boxing. But it was going to draw money, and that's what came first. It's not about the sanctity of the athletic competition to these promoters. It's about what's going to put butts in the seats and get people to tune in and watch a show on TV. And in 1978 or 9, I think it was, Larry Holmes versus Muhammad Ali, even though it was a lot sexier on paper than it was on the big screen, that's what was going to sell tickets. So that's the fight they put on, regardless of the health and safety risks that it posed. Muhammad Ali, you're noticing a recurring theme here that Muhammad Ali was really in it for entertainment purposes. He fought Antonio Inoki, a Japanese pro wrestler, in the first MMA fight in Japan. Then, obviously, what started this whole celebrity boxing train in the first place, Floyd Mayweather fought Conor McGregor a couple years back in 2017, I believe it was. So ultimately, whatever fights people think will draw money are the ones that will be promoted, not the fights with the two best fighters. Now, I'll grant you that every name I just said was at some point or another a professional fighter. But I will also bring up the fact that Muhammad Ali was also willing to fight Wilt Chamberlain in an exhibition match. So I think the principle that these fighters are in it to make money and not for the purity of the sport still stands. Because at the end of the day, as much as people want to talk about, the purity of boxing and what does this mean for the prestige of the sport, boxing and MMA fighting, all these like fight combat sports are sports that leave the people in them with a lot of times debilitating and life ending or life threatening injuries. So forget about the purity of the sport. Use the sport while you can to do what you can to help yourself. Now, I genuinely like when it comes to like things like WWE and basketball and baseball and things like that. I'm not quite as cold and calculating when it comes to that. I do think there's something to be said about legacy and caring about the work that you do, but not in this context. And WWE is a little bit different, obviously, because it's totally scripted. They don't try to pretend it's not. But I think there's less of a there obviously is huge safety and health risks in WWE. It's a dangerous activity to be involved in. But you can have a decades, 30, 40-year wrestling career. We've seen people like Sting do it. It's not the physical threat of injury the same way that boxing and UFC fighting is. And so I think in the WWE specific context, I wish people would take the championship and things like that more seriously than they do now because the championships have just been so devalued over the last couple years, and the creative people like John Cena have gone along with creative choices that they shouldn't have because they look at it more as a business and not as an actual integral thing, and so they don't put up a fuss where I wish they would. That's a lot different. Like, for example, I wish that John Cena would have demanded that Kurt Angle had his retirement match against him and not Kurt Angle versus Baron Corbin. I think that was a sad way for Kurt Angle to go out, and John Cena saying, at the end of the day, I'm just an employee. This is a business. I'm not going to put my foot down and push for this idea. I don't like that. That's totally different than boxers going out and having fights that'll put millions of dollars in their pockets and for an exhibition, essentially. Even though this isn't an exhibition, it's an official fight, but it feels like an exhibition. So, anyways, I think the principle still stands. If you're a professional fighter, chase that bag, get that money. And honestly, even that aside, Mike Tyson, at his age, he has gotten in better shape since he's been prepping for this comeback, and he looks like he's having more fun than he's had in years. He's a fighter at heart, and he's found a way to continue to get paid big money to do what he loves in his old age, and he should be getting applauded for that, not criticized for it. And for the people that want to talk about Mike Tyson ruining his legacy, he's already had his Michael Jordan on the Wizards era of his career anyways. So it's not like he hasn't already besmirched his legacy. The people talking about Mike Tyson doing damage to his legacy act like, he retired in 1996 and that his fights against Danny Williams and Kevin McBride never happened. Danny Williams knocked out Mike Tyson in the fourth round in 2004. And have you ever heard of Danny Williams? I haven't either until I did the research to this video. I knew vaguely that Mike Tyson had a couple past his prime fights in the early 2000s, but I couldn't have told you who they were with. And honestly, even Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis, those are two huge names. But at the time that Mike Tyson fought Lennox Lewis in 2003, he was not the baddest man on the planet. He was a big name that boxing put against the ring against their top new star because they knew it would sell tickets, and the casual fan who knew Mike Tyson by reputation but didn't know enough to know that Mike Tyson was past his prime, that Lennox Lewis beating him would help put some prestige on Lennox Lewis. Now that's a total WWE, you put over the new star on your way out mentality that boxing had in that moment. And that was a Mike Tyson who was unhealthy, who was risking his safety fighting past his prime because he was fighting actual trained boxers, actual professionals who have years of combat experience and are peak humans at the peak human condition because he was down bad and needed money. This is totally different than a Mike Tyson who looks like he's in a good place in life, about to make a multi-million-dollar payday, all to fight a YouTuber who doesn't hit like a real boxer does. So, more power to you, Mike Tyson. But that begs the bigger question. And this brings me to my final point. Is this fight disgraceful to boxing as a whole? Not at all. Like I just said, the fight game is vicious. It takes the people that partake in it, it chews them up, and it spits them out a lot worse than it found them. And at the end of the day, it's all about attractions and money. So I see this as being boxing in its purest form from a promotional level than it is as a disgrace, because this will be the biggest, most talked about fight of the year. And you know what? If you want to talk about disgraces, boxing should be ashamed of itself that that's true. It's sad for boxing that a YouTuber is a bigger draw than Canelo Alvarez. And I've complained about the state of boxing promotions at length on this show before. So this will be the last time I probably ever bring this up, at least until like 2 or 3 years from now, until the next Jake Paul fight comes around. But boxing hasn't delivered on super fights. Aside from Wilder Fury, in the last 4 years, they haven't had any big fights to get the average viewer interested. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence was good, but Errol Spence isn't a mainstream draw. And why haven't we gotten Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder, or Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Crawford, or Terrence Crawford versus Tank Davis? It's sad that YouTubers fighting draws more money and more interest than real fighters, but at the end of the day, that's not the YouTuber's fault. If people are going to pay millions of dollars to watch Jake Paul get in the ring with a bunch of old, washed up fighters, more power to Jake Paul, too. That's on boxing that nobody wants to watch Canelo Alvarez fight. Boxing and the sports media need to do a better job at promoting the personalities of these fighters. I mean, UFC is doing big business right now. People know who John Jones is. People don't know who Terrence Crawford is. When was the last time you saw Terrence Crawford being talked about on, I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon or anything that's not a super niche UFC boxing related show? I mean, I think ESPN covered Terrence Crawford briefly with the Errol Spence fight, but it's not like he's a recurring interviewee on ESPN segments. It's not like they catch up with him and say, oh, here's Terrence Crawford at the Lakers game. They need to do stuff like that. Part of being the face of a sport is you're the sports ambassador. Boxing should be sending its top stars around to be seen hobnobbing with other celebrities because it reminds people like, hey, this is somebody who exists. When you watch a Lakers game, they always have those shots during the game and they show all the celebrities that are watching and they'll say, oh my gosh, here's, I don't know, Rob Lowe, or oh my gosh, here's Beyonce and Jay-Z, and here's Shawn Michaels at a Spurs game. And you know what? It would be good for boxing if somebody like a Terrence Crawford or a Tank Davis or an Anthony Joshua got put up on the Jumbotron at an NFL game or an NBA game from time to time. So, yes, this fight is disgraceful, but not to Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. It's disgraceful to the sport of boxing only because it proves that actual boxers aren't draws and can't provide an athletic alternative to the entertainment this fight will give people. So that's all I've got to say about the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight. I'm really excited for it. I think it'll be fun to watch, if nothing else. So get your popcorn and have a good time. Now, last week I said, this week I said if Jake Paul beats Mike Tyson, then I'll have to eat crow next time I'm on here. Well, I do have some crow to eat tonight, and I'm sorry to all the Georgia fans who I jinxed last week when I said that the UGA Ole Miss game wasn't even worth going into because UGA was going to whoop them and it wasn't going to be close. Well, I was right about one thing. It wasn't close, but it wasn't because UGA was whooping Ole Miss. It was because Ole Miss beat UGA 28-10. Now, I was fully confident in that decision. I wasn't I wasn't just saying that to be, you know, I don't know, entertaining. Like I actually thought that UGA was going to whoop Ole Miss, so I didn't watch the game. But based on here's the stats breakdown. UGA got a touchdown in the first and a field goal in the third, and that's all the scoring they did. Ole Miss got 10 points in the first and 6 points in every other quarter. So Jackson Dart only threw one touchdown. This is a very field goal heavy game, but you got to score how you can score. And ultimately, the SEC has just been knocking each other out this entire season because pretty much every SEC contending team besides Tennessee and Texas have 2 losses. And if I'm not mistaken, pretty much all of them are 2 other SEC teams. Alabama beat LSU fairly handily last week. I thought it was a good game all around and the kind of game that Alabama needed to get back in the swing of things. So we'll see how things go this weekend, but Georgia's fallen all the way down to 11. And I expect Georgia to make the playoffs, but there's a chance that they don't. Alabama's up to number 9. Oregon's number 1. So, college football, the rankings are pure chaos right now. I'm loving it. It's entertaining as heck. And in the NBA, there were 3 big scoring performances this week. Giannis had 59 against the Pistons, and the Bucks are lucky that Giannis came through because in the first quarter, Giannis had 22 points and his teammates had 2, which is pathetic. The Bucks went 0 for 12 in the first quarter, and Giannis did pretty much all the scoring. And Dame, Chris Middleton, like all the Bucks good players were out in this game. So Giannis had to score 59 just for them to scrape by in single digits against the Pistons. But I just think that's sad. Ultimately, it's not a good thing if your depth is so low that without Dame Lillard and Chris Middleton, you can't even score more than 2 points in the first quarter. It's one thing to be top heavy, but that's like a pyramid being built upside down levels of top heavy. So I don't know what needs to be done. Giannis, for his part, he had 7 assists, so it's not like he was playing pure ISO ball. He was trying to get people involved, but the shots just weren't falling. And there's only so much you can do, but they need to figure something out because that's just not a good state to be in when all it takes is one injury to a top player. And you're not, even when they've had all their teams together, the Bucks haven't looked great. They're middle of the road right now in the Eastern Conference. But if one injury is all it takes for your team to go straight down to the tubes, they need to really find a way to work on their bench or else they're not going far. LeBron scored 35 against the Grizzlies. John Morant wasn't there. The Lakers won. LeBron got another triple-double. And for somebody who's going to be 40 in a month, he's looking pretty dang good out there. And Victor Wembanyama, on the flip end, on the age spectrum, he scored 50 points and became the youngest person in NBA history to score 50 points, the tallest person in NBA history to score 50 points, and he became only the fourth player in NBA history to score their first 50-point game within or on the 83rd game of their career. So good games all around for Giannis, Wemby, and LeBron. And hopefully they can keep up the good play because their teams, all three, need it. I mean, the Lakers have looked a lot better than anybody could have anticipated going into the season. JJ Redick has been doing pretty good as a coach so far. A lot of people had question marks about him. His biggest issue has been his inability to keep a straight face on the sidelines. He's been having temper tantrums like Tom Brady breaking iPads. But once he gets that settled in, I think he'll do a pretty good job as Lakers coach. But that being said, that's all I've got for y'all this week. Be sure to send in what you think your predictions are for the Mike Tyson fight, and I'll catch y'all later.